Buying land in Kenya is often perceived as a simple transaction between a buyer and a seller. In reality, the risk profile of a land purchase begins long before any contracts are signed. It begins with the source of the listing. In the previous video, we introduced 6 structural layers that determine whether a land purchase becomes a foundation or a future complication. Today, we will examine the first of these layers in depth, where the land listing actually comes from and why that matters. Origin of a land offer does not automatically determine whether a transaction is legitimate. However, it significantly influences 3 critical factors. First, the level of verification and document review required. Second, the overall cost structure of the transaction. And third, the potential exposure to hidden legal or structural risk. Different sources create different verification environments. Understanding this difference is essential before entering negotiations. Online platforms such as Gigi, as the market leader in online platforms, provide a broad overview of available land and market pricing. They create visibility and allow buyers to compare different regions and price levels. However, most property listings, particularly on large platforms, are posted by commercial intermediaries, including agents, brokers, and real estate companies. The individual advertising the property is therefore often not the registered owner, but a commission-based intermediary. This does not automatically create a problem. However, it increases the importance of independent verification. The identity of the registered owner must always be confirmed through an official land search. In addition to specialized property platforms, listings may also appear on marketplaces such as Facebook. In these cases, the focus is often on rentals, apartments, or short-term accommodation rather than undeveloped land. Regardless of the platform, a listing should be treated as a starting point for investigation, not as a proof of ownership. Price attractiveness alone should never replace documentation review. Direct transactions within private sellers are common. In some cases, the seller is the original registered owner. In others, the land has been inherited or transferred informally within a family structure. Documentation quality can vary significantly. Inherited land is frequently offered before succession processes have been formally completed. If probate has not been finalized and the legal heirs are not properly registered in the title, negotiations should not begin. Succession processes in Kenya can take years and often require court involvement. Where inheritance remains unresolved, transactions may become legally frozen. In addition, multiple family members may hold legal or customary claims, even if only one individual appears in the registry. Financial risk increases substantially if deposits are paid before succession is formally concluded. In cases where family resources are limited, the legal processes may stall, leaving buyers exposed to prolonged delays and potential loss of funds. Where the original registered owner is alive and present, the process is typically more straightforward. However, even in such cases, spousal consent and family agreement should be confirmed in order to avoid future dispute that may escalate into legal proceedings. Engaging directly with a private seller may reduce intermediary costs. However, it often increases verification, complexity, and legal exposure. Brokers and land agents typically charge between 5 up to 10% of the purchase price. A competent broker can add value by coordinating documentation, facilitating communication, and assisting throughout the transfer process. However, service levels vary substantially. Some agents remain involved through completion, others focus primarily on introduction. It is important to clarify who has formally engaged the broker. If a seller appoints a broker to market land, the commission is typically the seller's responsibility. If a buyer appoints a broker to identify suitable land, the buyer assumes the commission cost. In many online listings, agents act on behalf of the seller, but this should never be assumed. Commission structures must be clarified before negotiations begin. Brokers' compensation should generally only be finalized once a legal binding sale agreement has been executed. The presence of a broker does not replace independent legal verification. It changes the coordination structure but not the verification requirements. Buyers should clearly define the scope of services and commission agreements before proceeding. Developer-led projects, particularly gated communities or subdivided estates, often provide a more structured acquisition process. Documentation is typically more organized and infrastructure planning may already be incorporated. Also, transfer procedures are often standardized. In addition to land plots, developers may also offer individual residential units within apartment blocks or high-rise buildings. In such cases, the acquisition process is usually streamlined and administratively coordinated by the developer. This significantly reduces transactional friction for the buyer. However, pricing typically reflects this structured environment and reduces coordination burden. Buyers are effectively paying a premium for organization, infrastructure planning, and process management. Despite the structured setting, verification remains essential. Subdivision approvals, infrastructure commitments, section titles where applicable, and development plans must be formally registered and legally compliant. A structured sales environment does not eliminate regulatory review. It organizes it, but it does not replace it. In many parts of Kenya, land transactions originate through community networks. There is often someone who knows someone who is selling. For many buyers, this is the most common entry point into the market. Personal introduction may create a sense of familiarity and informal trust. However, informal trust structures do not substitute legal verification. The same procedures apply. Official land search, ownership confirmation, boundary verification, and regulatory compliance review. In addition, buyers should be aware that informal referrals often involve financial expectations. Recommendation fees or informal commissions may arise once a transaction is completed. This is particularly common where foreign buyers are involved. All compensation arrangements should therefore be clarified in advance. Trust may initiate a conversation. It cannot replace documentation. The source of a land listing does not determine whether a purchase is secure, but it determines the level of verification required, the transaction cost structure, and the coordination complexity. A disciplined acquisition process treats every listing as an entry point, not as validation. Risk assessment begins with understanding the origin of the offer. In the next video, we will examine ownership verification in detail and why a title deed alone is not sufficient to establish legal security. Land acquisition is not simple about availability. It is about structured risk evaluation.